next session will be Living in Next Normal, COVID-19 Lessons Learned and Future Directions by our panel of speakers comprising Dr. Sopon Iamsirithaworn, Deputy Director General of the Department of Disease Control, Dr. Pisit Puapan, Director of Macroeconomic Policy Bureau of the Fiscal Policy Office, Dr. Somprawin Manprasert, Chief Economist and Executive Vice President of the Bank of Ayudhya, and our moderator, Dr. Soraphol Tulayasathien, Senior Executive Vice President and the Head of Corporate Strategy Division of the Stock Exchange of Thailand. Once again, questions can be submitted through the QR code shown on the screen. To provide you with some background of our panelists, our first panelist, Dr. Sopon Iamsirithaworn, is a medical epidemiologist and has worked for the Ministry of Public Health for the past 27 years, starting from a community hospital in rural Thailand. On January 2020, he was appointed an incident commander for the COVID-19 situation management by the Director General of the Department of Disease Control. Since then, he has played a crucial role in COVID-19 pandemic response and mitigation at DEC. His vast experiences in public health service, as well as long-term collaboration with non-health network, have significantly contributed to the success of COVID-19 control. The second panelist, Dr. Pisit Puapan, is responsible for economic review, monitoring, forecast, and macroeconomic and fiscal policy analysis under the Ministry of Finance. He regularly meets with the IMF and credit rating agencies to hold policy discussion and dialogue on behalf of the ministry. Dr. Pisit has been delegated to work on various assignments within the ministry. His first assignment was with the Public Debt Management Office, responsible for bilateral loan negotiations. And our last panelist, Dr. Somprawin Manprasert. Dr. Somprawin was formerly an Associate Dean and Associate Professor at the Faculty of Economics, Chulalongkorn University. During the past years, he had experience in inter-industry economic modeling and policy research with various government agencies such as the NESDB, Bureau of the Budget, and the Ministry of Commerce.
Sawadee-krap. Greeting from Bangkok. Welcome to the first session of the Thailand Focus 2021. The session is on living in the next normal, COVID-19, lesson learned, and future directions. During the next hour, we will hear directly from authorities and experts from both public and private sector on the most relevant questions today. What is the current COVID situation and how it impacts the economy? What are the government responses and how are its effectiveness? And what are the outlook and policy going forward at both macro and sectoral levels? I will organize this session in two rounds of questions. The first round will focus on the current situation, the effectiveness of measures, and what have we learned. The second round will focus on the outlook, the additional measure, if any, and the opportunities going forward. So without further ado, may I start the first round question to Dr. Sopon from the Ministry of Public Health. Sawadee-krap, Dr. Sopon. Could you please update us on the current COVID situation and the measures that government has taken place to contain the situation? How effectiveness are these measures and what is your thought on this? Please.
Good morning and thank you, Dr. Soraphol, for your introduction. I'd like to share with you the situation of evolving COVID-19 pandemic. As we know, today the world, including Thailand, is facing the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is a very important situation since the latest outbreak in many countries caused by the Delta variants. May I have my slide on the screen? If we look at the number of reported cases around the world, every day we have seen 500,000 cases, and also some of them die of the disease, around 10,000 cases. Thailand is also facing the same pandemic. We have experiencing the COVID-19 Delta variant since early July. And as we see on the slide, the peak in Thailand just passed last week. Even though we are on the downward trend, but we still have 20 cases reported on the daily basis, and around 200 to 300 cases of them die of the disease every day. However, with the great effort from the government and all the people in the society, all the public and private sectors, we believe that the situation of COVID-19 pandemic will be under the control in the very near future. Looking at the trend of the COVID-19 globally and also in Thailand, we have seen the sign of the decreasing number of cases over the time. If we go to the next slide, some of the key factors that can help mitigating the impact of the COVID-19. Thailand has gone through many measures, starting from the strict preventive measures in the public health, and also some of the travel restriction in the country and also internationally. So if you look at the effect of the COVID-19 response in Thailand, 2 months ago, when we started the lockdown measures, the country have faced the high number of cases during the last 2 months until last week, when we see the sign of improvement. Another factor is the vaccination population. We have vaccinated people in Thailand, both Thai and foreigners, starting from late February this year. However, the high number of doses have been administered in early June. So until now, we have vaccinated over 21 million population, and this is about 30% of the people in Thailand who received the first dose, and around 10% of the Thai people have received 2 doses of the COVID-19 vaccines. Looking at the number in the table, we have a good plan to procure and vaccinate more people in the next 4 months before the end of 2021. So the number of vaccines will be increasing, and also have more vaccine that efficacious to prevent the COVID-19. For example, we have more Pfizer vaccines in the last quarter of this year, and also AstraZeneca vaccines. However, in certain location, we also have Sinopharm and also Sinovac vaccine for people. But right now, I would say that Thailand is able to secure over 1 million doses of the vaccines to cover at least 50 million people who live in Thailand. And this could be enough for the herd immunity building in the next 4 months. So I hope that the figure will help us to understand the current situation and also the near future. And I have one more slide regarding the Phuket sandbox. This go to the next slide, please. Starting from 1st of July, the Thai government implemented the Phuket sandbox. This is the model that we would like to show to the world that we can have the safe travel and presence in Thailand, starting from Phuket before extending to other cities. And the figure show that we have over 24,000 visitors alive in Phuket, and some of them, only a small number, For example, 70 of them detected the COVID virus. However, most of them have really mild symptoms, and some of them have no symptoms, so they can spend time in Phuket and have activities as normal, but under the surveillance of the local health officer. And the government periodically evaluate this project and very satisfied with the outcome so far. So we will extend the project to other tourist attractions and other cities. In the next slide, we will see that in the slide we have Phuket as the main city, but the tourists also have an opportunity to travel to other cities. For example, Krabi, Phang and PP Island, and also Koh Yao Island, for example, and also Samui on the east coast of Thailand. So, and this project has been proved so far that it's safe and also provide the good example to other cities in the way that we can make the economic recovery faster. So this is something that I like to share with you, and if you have any question, please feel free to ask later. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sopon. Dr. Sopon has given us some information, very useful information on 4 points. The first is on that the new cases of COVID seems to be leveling off. So we are maybe at the peak. The second is that we are on the progress of vaccination for the country. At the moment, for the population who got the first dosage of vaccine is roughly almost 30%. We also reaching the herd immunity sometime in the next 4 months, given the availability of the various vaccine that we have in place. And very interestingly, Thailand is implementing Phuket model sandbox, which is a way to have a contained and manageable COVID situation to promote the tourism within the certain area. We will get back to this on the second round. So may I now turn to Dr. Pisit. Now that we have the update on the public health situation, could you please update us on the current economic situation? How has the COVID affected the economy? What are the measures that the governments have in place, and how effective are they? And what about the fiscal situation? Thank you so much, Dr. Pisit.
Thank you, Dr. Soraphol. So I would like to brief on the economic situation and outlook for Thailand, and also what are the policy that the Ministry of Finance and the Thai government has been doing to deal with the COVID-19, and also the longer term policy after the COVID. I think on the recent economic situation, on the next slide, we can see that the impact on the Thai economy from the COVID last year, the economy contracted by 6.1%. But I have to say that take us all back to last year. I think many people expected the Thai economy to contract 8 to 10%. So I think even we look at last year, the economic performance was better than what we expected. And looking at this year, the first quarter GDP showed the recovery of by 7.5%. I think this is above the market consensus of 6.4%. So you can see that the Thai economic recovery turned out to be better than what we expected in the beginning of the year. But right now we are dealing with the current wave of the COVID-19 spreading in Thailand. But as highlighted by the finance minister and the Bank of Thailand governor, that our economic fundamental is strong. So when we look at all the economic numbers, public debt to GDP, the profile of public debt to GDP in Thailand. So our current public debt to GDP is at the moment, 55% of GDP. Still, compared to other countries, Thailand has a better fiscal position compared to other countries. So I think this is quite good that we can use fiscal policy to support the economy. And we have been using fiscal policy to support the economy since the COVID-19 started beginning of last year. And most of our public debt are internal debt, baht-denominated debt, and long-term debt. And also other indicator, unemployment remain low, even the most recent number of unemployment show improvement. So I think during the peak of the unemployment was in the middle of last year. So I think looking at the moment, unemployment rate in Thailand remain low, inflation remain low. And as highlighted by the Bank of Thailand governor, that our international reserve is quite high compared to reserve to short-term external debt, which is the indicator that rating agencies, when they come to Thailand, they look at. Right now is above 3.4%. So I think this shows the word that the BOT governor used, the resiliency of the Thai economy. On the next slide, I think the most recent economic indicator that was the major one that was announced by the government yesterday, the export. So I think you can see that right now the Thai economy has been supported by the strong recovery of the export of goods. So the July export number show continued strong growth by 20.3%, and the first 7 months of the year export value expand by 16%. So you can see that the export has been the supporting factor for the Thai economy so far. And on the next slide, now we come to the economic outlook. I would like to share you the Ministry of Finance. We announced the economic outlook for this year back in July to be 1.3% for the overall real GDP growth for this year. And next year, we expect the recovery of the Thai economy by 4 to 5%. And I think we can compare that to other national authority, NESDC and the Bank of Thailand. I think we all share similar view that this year the economy will continue the recovery, and we should be able to achieve some growth this year, and with stronger recovery next year. And as highlighted by Dr. Sopon, that in terms of the new infection in Thailand, that we expect to be peaking at this time and in the coming months. So that means in our economic assumption for the growth of 2021 and 2022, I think the major assumption will be the coming out from the COVID-19. I think we expect that by the end of the year, the COVID-19 situation should improve, and going to next year, I think that will lead to the reopening of the country. So I think we expect the next year growth to be stronger momentum for with the gradual reopening of the country, with the Phuket Sandbox as the first initiative by the government. On the next slide. I think in terms of the fiscal policy to support the economy, the major one, the new money that the government inject to the economy is since April last year is under the 1 trillion baht program. 1 trillion baht is about 6% of GDP. So you can see that direct spending from the government account for a sizable stimulus program. And so far, I would like to say that the disbursement is about 83%. So that means out of the 1 trillion baht, there remain about 170 billion baht in the money that will be spent by the government in the coming months under the 1 trillion baht program. So if you look at the various policy, the objective under the 1 trillion baht is the medical resolution of the COVID-19, compensation, rehabilitation, and the recovery and stimulating the domestic economy, and various programs that I think people are aware of under the initiative by the government, whether it be the co-payment program, the Rao Chana program, and the first program that deal with the COVID-19 back last year, all use the funding from the 1 trillion baht program. So I think overall broad benefit has been achieved under the 1 trillion baht program. So we can see that 48.5 million people benefit from the program. And we can see that the economic impact, the positive economic impact that the 1 trillion baht program has on the economy to handle the COVID-19 situation. Looking forward on the next slide, I think as we all know that the COVID-19 will be with us for some time. So the government introduced additional borrowing on the next slide, the 500 billion baht program. So I think this is the additional money in addition to the 1 trillion baht. And the government has already approved 65 billion baht under the new borrowing 500 billion baht. So there remain about 434 billion baht to be spent, to be allocated. So I think so you can see that in terms of the fiscal resources that the government has to deal with the COVID-19, so far we have already generated the borrowing plan for 1 trillion baht and the 500 billion baht. So overall, we plan to use 1.5 trillion baht under the existing fiscal policy program to deal with the COVID-19. On the next slide, in terms of the budget framework, we can see that the parliament is just recently debate on the budget framework for the fiscal year 2022, next fiscal year. So you can see as highlighted by the table that the Ministry of Finance and the government will continue to pursue fiscal policy expansion to support the economy going into next year. On the lastly, I think on the next slide, I think we can also look at the medium-term policy. I think we all know that Thailand, we need to upgrade our industry, upgrade our economic production. So the government continue to support the Eastern Economic Corridor program and the targeted industry, the 12 targeted industries. So these are the policy that I would like to share with you in the first round in terms of the economic fundamental in Thailand remain strong, and the government fiscal policy has been supportive of the economic recovery. And we also continue to use the fiscal expansion continue to the next fiscal year 2022, and the medium-term policy to promote the investment and to upgrade the Thai industry. So these are the policy that I would like to share with the investor at the Thailand Focus today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pisit. In his first round, is quite packed with information. But summary, we learned that the impact of COVID has resulted in negative growth in 2020, but it's much less than expected given Thailand's resiliency and the fiscal room that can implement the fiscal policy. Dr. Pisit has highlighted that the growth largely come from export as well as some of the fiscal stimulus. And the fiscal stimulus is quite broad-based, covering about 48 million Thai people. That's about 2/3 of Thai population, and it's quite sizable. 1 trillion baht at the moment, and additional 0.5 trillion baht in total, roughly around $50 billion that is coming. In addition to the stimulus, Dr. Pisit also highlighted that we also do not neglect the longer-term issue, such as the new industry that he will cover in the next round. So let me turn to Dr. Somprawin. Now that we have the picture from both the public health and economy and the macro level, Could Dr. Somprawin elaborate on the impact on the sectoral level of some industry? Which sector has been affected? Which sector has been able to adopt or opportune from this situation? Please, Dr. Somprawin.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Soraphol. The impact of COVID-19 outbreak has tremendously affected the Thai economy. Yet each sector has been impacted differently. Let me move on to my page number 2. And since the channels of transmission of this crisis to economic impact started from shutdown in tourism and related industry, then as we know that social distancing caused supply disruption in some manufacturing industry. And once the shutdown is long enough, income effect kicks in. Lower aggregate demand led to further negative feedback loop and caused downward spiral of supply-demand interaction, which further suppressed consumption and other related industry. And I present to you here the results that we calculated since last year. We order the impact from the most negative on the left-hand side to the right-hand side. An orange dot represents the lowest point of revenue in each industry. And the yellow tab represents the pace of recovery of each sector from the end of 2020 to the end of 2021. And as we can see from the chart here, the most negative sectors are ones that with the direct hit, income would drop around 30 to 50%. And these sectors are air transportation, hotel, restaurants, followed by recreation, auto dealers, and business services. And you can see on the far right, we can see that the most resilient sectors are mainly necessary goods, pandemic-induced industries such as food and telecommunication. And when we look at the pace of recovery, the difference between the yellow tab, we also find that the hardest hit sector are also the one that latest to recover too. For example, by the end of 2021, this year, air transport and hotel restaurant are still lost their income as much as 40 to 25% respectively. Next page. And looking ahead, we feel that the recovery of tourism and related industry will take a bit some time before getting back to pre-COVID level. As you know, that the key determinants on how Thailand could reopen itself depends on how fast vaccination progress is, not only in Thailand, but also in other countries too, especially our tourism markets. For this year, Krungsri Research expect the number of foreign tourists to plunge to around 150,000 and 2.5 million next year. And as you know, largely caused by severe outbreak of the Delta variants, slower than expected vaccination progress and efficacy of the available vaccine. And on the right-hand side, we would see gradual improvement from mid of next year. Why we believe so? Because at that time, Thailand should reach its herd immunity and situations in other Asian countries should improve. And the pace on the top chart comparing to the bottom chart on the right-hand side, domestic tourism would recover faster than foreign tourists. It would take another 3 to 4 years for domestic and foreign tourists to get back to pre-COVID at 40 million visitors. And let me elaborate this a little bit more on page 4. For Thai tourism and hotel industry, we believe that there are 4 phases to recovery road out of this COVID crisis. We call it 4 Bs. Begin, boost, bubble, and build back. At the beginning phase, the key focus would be interventions to build confidence in domestic tourists. Second phase, we would focus on boosting domestic tourists and long-term expat in Thailand. And third, this is critical step where we should create travel bubbles with targeted foreign partners, and it involves a think-through process of traveling journey as well as arrangement in health-related issue. And the last phase, the phase that we go back to pre-COVID. tourism after COVID will be different than before. So we should focus to improve our capacity, transform safety and healthcare services, and have effective purpose-led transformation. In fact, if you look at this chart, at the beginning of this year, we thought that we were about to change from phase 2 to phase 3. But having the Delta variant has made us fall back to the phase 1 again. It will take time, but given the vaccine we rolled out gradually in coming months, and the cure of the virus is on its way, I believe that the risk of falling back once again is lower. Next page. Although the reopening is on its way, as I mentioned consistently that things will be different. Tourism industry needs to transform itself to the world after COVID. We highlight there are 4 factors that would shape future of tourism and hotel industry in Thailand. First, demographic change and aging society, meaning people live longer. So at one point in time, we are facing with many generations. Right now, we have, for example, baby boomer, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha. There are 5 at least generations at the time. So each of them has its own preference and taste. Therefore, tourism industry would need to serve more variety of consumer. Second, because tourism is luxury goods, as you know, income sensitive, and rise of middle income class in emerging markets will also contribute to high demands of tourism. Moreover, people would prefer personalized product, and demand for tourism will be fragmented. And the third role, technology has become part of traveling. We familiar with mobile internet navigation system. It changed the way that we explore, experience travel. Therefore, tourism industry should utilize this capacity to better serve customers. And lastly, pandemic had made us more concerned about health. Previously, we concerned about health when we get sick, but now people are more concerned about prevention. Right now, we concern about health not only when we get sick, but all the time in our daily lives. And this will apply for change in consumer behavior in tourism industry too. Next page. My last point during first round would be related to strategy that would help tourism industry to get through this crisis. There are 4 of them on the right-hand side. First, it's the crisis response strategy. We need to seek for sufficient liquidity. Alternative revenue stream is important. That we still yet wait for normal business to get back. And second, demand response strategy. We should selective design right strategy for targeted customer. And the most important thing, we should ensure business flexibility during this huge uncertain episode. And third, it's about medium-term transformation. The COVID crisis taught us we are living in a VUCA world. Therefore, managing risk, including diversification of market, expanding portfolio, reduce fixed asset would help mitigate risk in the future. The fourth is more about longer term. We should look out for new business opportunity. Finding partnership would be good strategy for expand business. To summarize my point for this first round, tourism industry is the hardest hit from this COVID crisis. However, given mega trends and change in landscape of tourism industry, there is also a huge opportunity going forward. And in all, tourism industry should transform itself to the world after COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Somprawin. As you summarized, the sectoral impact is quite vastly different from sector to sector, and tourism is quite a big part of the Thai economy. Dr. Sethaput, in the beginning of today's speech, he mentioned that it has 21% of local employment. Dr. Somprawin outlined that eventually tourism will recover. It will take 4 steps, and given our experience, we will continue to do so, given as we progress on the vaccination. So may I turn back to the second round of the question that focus on the outlook. I would like to ask Dr. Sopon, could you please help paint the picture of the public health next year? Do we need the third or the fourth booster vaccine? Can you talk more a little bit on how effectiveness of the Phuket sandbox and whether we have planned to expand to other areas and how would we do it? So please, Dr. Sopon, please. Dr. Sopon, could you please turn on the mic, please?
Thank you very much for the question, Dr. Soraphol. If you look at the vaccination rate, right now we vaccinated around 500,000 doses a day. Most of them go with the criteria, for example, the elderly and people with chronic diseases. However, if we can keep like 500,000 doses a day, we would vaccinate like 12 to 15 million doses a month. And within the next 4 months, we would be able to achieve the 70% coverage. However, we also have a concern. Those who receive 2 doses of Sinovac vaccine early this year in March and April, the Ministry of Public Health have a plan to give the booster dose at the end of the year when we have a large volume of vaccine available in the country. So look at the number of vaccine doses procured by the Thai government. We have over 100 million, but we also have some vaccine procured by the private sector. For example, Moderator that will be in Q4 of this year. A small number of doses will be available in October, and the rest will be in November and December. So if we look at this number of vaccine, we quite confident that we can get the people in Thailand to reach the herd immunity. And by this kind of strategy, plus the universal prevention by people and also workplace measures, we will be able to prevent the return of the big wave of the COVID-19 in the country. So if you look at the Phuket sandbox, it is quite amazing that we can prevent the transmission of the COVID-19 among the international traveler. When I show the number of 24,000 visitors, all of them came from overseas abroad, and there is no transmission among them. However, we have a sporadic cases of COVID-19 in Phuket that we can manage to control the situation. Most of them receive vaccine in Phuket, even higher in terms of percentage, reached 90% of the vaccination coverage. So if we look at the increasing number of arriving travelers in Phuket, it's more crowding at this time. So the government provide additional options for them to travel to other cities in the south. As I said, PP Island, Kok Yao Island, and some provinces surrounding in the 100 kilometers radius. And if we can make the cities safer, not only Phuket but also other nearby cities, we can have more wider area safe for the tourists, and each tourist spend around 50,000 baht when they stay in Phuket for hotel, food, and other activities. So the number I got is around 1.2 billion baht so far from the 1st of July. So I think in the future, if the Phuket sandbox expand to cover other cities, we can see the positive impact of the safe travel on the economic recovery.
Thank you, Dr. Sopon, for clarifications on the outlook of the public health and policy going forward. May I now turn to Dr. Pisit for the second round question. Do we need additional stimulus? And what about the fiscal sustainability? Can we afford additional fiscal stimulus? And moreover, do government have in place measures to support new industries that we want to promote in the future?
Yes, I think, thank you, Dr. Soraphol, for the question. I think in terms of the fiscal stimulus, whether we need additional fiscal stimulus it will be decided by the policymaker. But I would like to, as I presented in my previous presentation, at the moment, we have under the 1 trillion baht, some remaining amount to be spent, and under the 500 billion baht, some about 440 billion baht, under the 500 billion baht to be allocated. So at the moment, we still have the ongoing fiscal resources to deal with the COVID-19. But I think, yes, I think investor may know that there are some discussion about whether the government should introduce additional stimulus program, but I think that will be decided by the policymaker. But I can reassure that the fiscal position in Thailand, as I mentioned, 55% of GDP at the moment, and our public debt limit is 60%. But I think investors that come to the Ministry of Finance always ask this question about 60% public debt to GDP limit. I would like to explain that this limit is not written into the law, but it's just the guideline regulation by the Fiscal Policy Committee chaired by the Prime Minister. So this limit can be reviewed and revised, readjust according to the appropriate situation. So again, whether Thailand will need the additional stimulus program will depend on how we, as Dr. Somprawin mentioned, how we going forward, how the economy recover and coming out from the COVID-19. And we get the good picture from the Ministry of Public Health, Dr. Sopon, that the going forward, I think many people expect the peak of the COVID-19 to be coming soon, and then gradually we should be able to, with the vaccination program, we should be able to coming out. So I think the government will have to balance between the short-term COVID-19 and the medium-term development, because the fiscal policy will continue to play the major role for Thailand dealing with the COVID-19 and the medium-term development plan, as highlighted by the finance minister this morning, the six strategy. One, improving the inequality by promoting equal opportunity. Two, continuing with the infrastructure investment. Three, reducing the greenhouse gas, climate change. Four, restructuring competitive policy. Five, promoting future industry, as the Dr. Soraphol question. So I think six, I think very important, promoting the SME competitiveness. And I think this will, the fifth and sixth objective will directly go to the realm of stock exchange of Thailand, the role of the capital market to promote the future, the place for the new resource of fund for the SME, the financing channel for the public and private sector to raise the new fund to investment, the leveraging leading company that will promoting them to become regional and global corporation, transparent and sustainable development goal, financial exchange using up-to-date technology, participating different investor group, and lastly, a place for regulatory and financial transparency and minority investor protection. So these are the programs that I think the Ministry of Finance and the government and all the financial authority are working to promote the medium-term development of the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pisit. May I ask the second round question to Dr. Somprawin? You have painted some picture on the tourism sector, but what about other sectors? How has different other sectors evolved post-pandemic? How have they adapted, or what could be the next big things for Thailand?
Thank you, Dr. Soraphol. Actually, interesting question. Let me turn to my page 7. And although we have been bombarded by this COVID crisis, let me stress that underlying this, there is industry transformation going on in the world. Things will change. Mega trends, pandemic-induced activities have accelerated transition. And there are both global and domestic factors that actually shape industry landscape going forward. Under global perspective, divergence of economic recovery, global value chain transformation, servicification will shape external demand-driven activities. Domestically, pandemic has induced some growing industry, coupled with government infrastructure projects. Both traditional new infrastructure projects will crowd in private investment in long term. And this chart shows that the pandemic has induced a rise of 3 promising sectors in Thailand. First, digital businesses from accelerating adoption in digital technology, as we have this MS team and digital connectivity through this conference. And other related industry should include robotics, automation, data center, cloud, and digital services. Second group of sector related to medical sector. It actually benefited from rising hygiene and wellness related trend. And sectors or industry in this area would be private hospital, medical devices, and medical tourism. And third group on the right-hand side, the rise of connectivity in regional countries and logistic networks reduced demands for smart logistics, which related to transportation, aviation, and modern warehouse. In fact, there has been evidence of the rising trend and investor interest in this business in Thailand. For example, you can see a number in the box below that investment value for digital business applied for tax benefits surged by 120% during the first half of this year. And even more solid in medical sector, where investment value of the BOI application surged by 230% during the same period. Next slide. And as I mentioned consistently, industry transformation and changing global supply chain will check up the outlook of production activities going forward. At Krung Sri Research, we have identified 6 sectors that Thailand has potential in years to come. Our conclusion, based on our sectoral analysis, looking at strength, government support, structure for each industry in Thailand. And we list out on the left-hand side of this diagram, there are 6 of them. First, agriculture and food. Second, high-tech industry. Third, construction and real estate. Fourth, hotel, healthcare, and modern trade and telecommunication. And lastly, logistics. You can see the details of related business on the right-hand side diagram, but I will not go into detail. Next page. So let me step back a bit and look at a country as a whole. At Krung Sri Research, we actually have calculated an index called Sectoral Potential Index. We collect data from all over the world, from OECD, 46 countries, and we found that Thailand is actually ranked in the middle of all. At the table, we are number 35 in this chart, and Thailand is also ranked number 2 in ASEAN countries. Next page. Although 35 rank seems not to be high, But if we look into details by sector, there are 7 industries that Thailand is ranked in the top 15 of the world. As you can see from this chart, from the top, the green one, for example, coke and refined petroleum is ranked number 9 in the world. Rubber and plastic also ranked number 9. And other industry, including F&B, healthcare, recreation, wholesale, retail, textile, respectively, are in the top 15 of the world. But where we are going from here, it depends on how do we do with ourselves. There is industry transformation. We are lucky enough to have good foundation of industry development over the past 30, 40 years, but we need to leverage our resources so that we can move on to the next level. My last slide, trying to point out and show the example here. And, industry development is not easy. At industry level, factors that shape sectoral potential are different among industry. This chart, we trying to, calculate and find the right strategy for each industry. Let me explain just 2 examples here. First, for motor vehicle, we should move up a bit upstream on the supply chain, utilizing technology R&D and find potential partners. For example, with Japan, China, and Indonesia. For healthcare, we have much potential. If we move downward along the supply chain and seek partnership, expand business to Indonesia and Vietnam, it will opening up more opportunity in this business. In summary, let me stress again that we are in transition. Disrupting world give us both challenges and opportunity. But given our capability and resources, I strongly believe that there are much more opportunities than challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Somprawin. We now have many questions from the floor. I will try my best to organize a question to each of you in a summary manner. So the first set of questions may ask Dr. Sopon. There are questions about whether the current measures is enough to ensure herd immunity by the end of the year. That's the first question. The second question, I think you have answered, is that for the people who have vaccinated with Sinovac, will they need additional doses? The third question is whether it would be possible to get the second generation vaccine or Moderna or Pfizer faster than the schedule that Dr. Sopon has shown on screen. And the last question for you is whether Thailand would consider new investment licensing arrangement for the vaccination manufacturing in Thailand. So please.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the current measure is quite effective when we look at the number of new cases start to go down. However, the vaccination is a key factor. If we look at the number of vaccine doses procured in the country, it's quite good in terms of have the variety of the vaccine. When people talk about the second generation of the vaccine, they should know that all of them are under the research and development. There is no currently available second generation vaccine in the market. So every country is waiting for the second generation, and it would be available next year. Thailand also have a plan to procure second generation vaccine. We talk with Pfizer and also Moderna and AstraZeneca for the second generation vaccine. The government plan to buy 120 million doses of vaccine next year. This is after the first 100 million doses. So there is no, I think at this time we focus on vaccinating everyone who are vulnerable and everyone who needs the vaccine at this time. And if you look at the people who got 2 doses of Sinovac is only 3.5 million people. 500,000 of them are healthcare workers who already received booster dose in the last several weeks. So only 3 million doses are people. Maybe some of them are in Bangkok, in major cities. So they would definitely get the booster dose by the end of this year when we have more than enough vaccine available. And the last question regarding the investment in the new vaccines, Thailand also have several, maybe I would say that researchers working on the clinical trial of the vaccine. For example, the mRNA vaccine developed by the researcher group at the Chulalongkorn University. They are also doing the first clinical trial, and we expect to see the outcome, the result early next year. So if it's successful, we would have to invest by the government to manufacture this vaccine in the country. But don't forget AstraZeneca manufacturer in Thailand, also a part of the collaboration between the AstraZeneca Oxford University and the SAM Bioscience Thailand. This is also served as the local production. That's why we can secure many million doses of AstraZeneca this year and also next year. Thank you.
Two more questions related to Dr. Pisit and Dr. Somprawin. The first question to Dr. Pisit is about the economic impact of the Phuket model, whether it has impact or whether it can be modified or increased in scale in the national level. And the second related question to Dr. Somprawin is about the future of tourism industry. If we have the COVID situation live with us in near future, how will the industry transform itself, or what are the necessary measures in your opinion? So the first is Dr. Pisit on the impact of Phuket.
Thank you. I think the impact from the Phuket model is Phuket sandbox model is the start of the reopening of Thailand to the foreign traveler. So I think we look at as reported by Dr. Sopon that from July 1st we have about 24,000 foreign visitors to the Phuket sandbox already. So I think gradually this will pick up the momentum as the coming months forward. But I think the government and the tourism ministry that I have a meeting with the tourism ministry, they take a medium-term view that Phuket sandbox is the initial step for the Thailand reopening, and then it will expand to different area, the foreign tourism, Samui, plus model, Krabi, Phang Nga, Chiang Mai, Pattaya, Buriram, and eventually Bangkok and Saam Hua Hin. So these are the medium-term plan in for the Thailand reopening. Then I think ultimately, if Dr. Soraphol asked about the impact of the tourism, foreign tourism on Thailand under the Samui model, I think the big impact will be coming for the year 2022. That the Bank of Thailand expects the bigger tourism, foreign tourism recovery. The Ministry of Finance, we expect next year the foreign tourism to be 10 to 12 million people. So I think we can see the big rebound in foreign tourism next year. Again, 10 million foreign tourism is nowhere near what we had pre-COVID, 40 million, close to 40 million. But still, it's a step forward that we are coming out of the COVID-19. Last point that I would like to share is the tourism policy for Thailand. I think the tourism ministry is preparing the strategy, the medium-term strategy at the moment. So I think the important point that we have to remember is that tourism in Thailand is still very much concentrated. Our team study, our macro team study, we find that it's very clustered in 5 areas. The northern part, the Chiang Mai area, the Bangkok and the vicinity area, the eastern part, the southern part, and the upper Isan, upper northeastern area. So there are 5 clusters of the tourism, foreign and domestic. And there's not much spillover of the tourism benefit to the nearby province in Thailand. So I think this is the critical strategy issue that if we would like to use tourism as the backbone of the Thailand economic development, we need to link the tourism to different province, networking between different provinces, which Dr. Sopon mentioned, the Phuket Sandbox is trying to link the foreign tourists to other provinces around Phuket. So I think this is and this will open the new tourism market in Thailand that will attract more travelers coming instead of coming to the same place every year. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pisit. Very interesting point that tourism in Thailand is concentrated in just a few clusters. That means that we could potentially multiply the sandbox to this cluster and recover most of the bulk of the tourism. But still, 10 million tourists is still quite different from the 40 million that we have in number of tourists prior to COVID. So this leads to the second questions to Dr. Somprawin, that if tourism going to remain like this in the new normal, what should we do?
Thank you, Dr. Soraphol. Actually, as I mentioned before, tourism industry need to transform itself. But my views on long term of this sector is still positive, very positive, especially for Thailand. And you know, one of the major concern or our travelers value the most is health concern. And as you can see that given that Thailand has also a very strong healthcare system and healthcare sector, and this, you know, can connect very well, to this services industry, including tourism, restaurant, and hotel. And in the end, we would see the merging in sector between tourism and healthcare. And again, when we look at infrastructure in Thailand, we have to prepare well. And I'm sure that we would be able to leverage ourselves across this sector. And having said that, in long term, as I mentioned, we have a rising middle income class that would lead to more domestic travelers in Thailand. And around us, there is also a rising middle income class in the region. And this new rich, has been research and evidence that Thailand is one of their preferred destination too. So yeah, to summarize, I feel very positive after COVID. The tourism industry in Thailand will get back to normal. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we are running out of time. So may I give just the last round for all the speaker, or just the last word that you want to leave for the investors? Just any few minutes, last few minutes word of thoughts. May I start with Dr. Sopon?
Thank you very much. Since the situation is under control and we anticipate that the number of cases will go down, the number of vaccination coverage will go up, the government will have to make a decision to ease all the activities, particularly in the provinces that already control the outbreak situation very well. So if you look at Thailand, around 20 provinces have number of cases go up and down, but the majority of the provinces in Thailand has control the outbreak situation quite well. So we will see something change next week. For example, relaxing certain activity, allowing people to spend time on their daily life, but with the new normal, safer, and also want them to be aware of the importance of the vaccination. So for me, there is a big hope for the next couple months when we can let people to live in the new normal or next normal life and stay safe under the current situation that we believe that COVID will be with us for a long time. So we have to cope ourselves in the way that we can return to our life as before or close to as before. Thank you.
ครับDr. Pisit ครับ any last word
Yes, I think investor should understand that should look beyond the COVID-19 situation, because I think we expect the government expect the recovery next year, and with the information that I share today should give some confidence in terms of the economic fundamental of Thailand, the current account, the international reserve position, the public debt to GDP. So these are the strong economic fundamental that should allow the Thailand to recover after the COVID, and the medium-term policy that our strength in the service sector, in the tourism sector, and the upgrading of the manufacturing sector. I think these will support the Thailand economic growth in the medium term. Thank you.
ครับ Dr. Somprawin ครับ
Thank you, Kap. Actually, my last word again go back to industry transformation. Behind all of this COVID, there will be rise and fall of industry in the future. So good investment strategy is selective. But luckily, the COVID crisis actually make it clear for us. It actually accelerates the rise of industry in the future, and it stressed the fall of some certain industry. And I have elaborated in my talk today. So things will change, and invest wisely, and we would see benefits of all this information. Thank you.
ครับ so stay safe, stay positive, and invest wisely. Okay. So on behalf of the Stock Exchange of Thailand, we would like to thank the participants, Dr. Sopon Iamsirithaworn, Deputy Director General of the Department of Disease Control, Ministry of Public Health, Dr. Pisit Puapan from the Fiscal Policy Office, Ministry of Finance, and Dr. Somprawin Manprasert from Bank of Ayudhya for the fruitful and insightful informations. For the audience, thank you for being with us. You can download all the PowerPoint from the participant speakers from our website, and please stay tuned. The seminar is finished for the morning session, but we do have the afternoon session, very interestingly on the adaptation of the big business, the innovative business, as well as the sustainability issue starting at 1 p.m. Bangkok time. So thank you very much and stay safe. สวัสดีครับ